I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. You're walking down your street on just a totally unremarkable Tuesday,
Okay.
and you turn the corner, and right there in front of you, you witness an event that just completely fractures your understanding of reality.
Like what?
Well, let's say you watch a man who has been a double amputee for decades, and suddenly, inexplicably, you watch him just regrow his limbs and walk away.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would definitely do it.
Right. Your brain goes into immediate overdrive, like trying to categorize the anomaly. You ask yourself, are you looking at some highly coordinated illusion or a localized glitch in the laws of physics?
Right, your brain just searches for a logical box to put it in.
Exactly. But what if what you're looking at is actually a message? Like, what if an event like that isn't just a spectacle meant to, drop your jaw, but an actual readable sentence in a much larger conversation?
Yeah, that forces a completely different cognitive approach because
Yeah.
if you treat it as a random anomaly, you just stare at the mechanics of the event. But if you treat it as a message, you have to start looking for a linguistic structure. You start asking, well, what is the syntax here? Who is speaking? And what exactly are they trying to say to me?
And that structural approach is exactly what we are exploring today. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are spending our time today unpacking a really fascinating theological framework.
Yeah, it's quite the framework.
It really is. It's built around the idea that the miracles of Jesus in the biblical narratives, they weren't just random acts of divine compassion. And they certainly weren't some touring magic show designed to gather crowds.
Right.
We are analyzing the argument that these events were a highly specific, visible grammar. Like they were signs announcing the arrival of an entirely new kingdom.
And, framing them as grammar is just a brilliant way to understand the ancient text. I mean, because grammar has intent, right?
Exactly. It has rules.
Yeah, it has rules. It communicates a very specific reality about the nature of the world.
Now, setting the parameters for our conversation today, because I think this is important, we are diving deep into Christian theology and ancient biblical literature, leaning really heavily on a paper and an infographic by researcher Chris R. Vlasis.
Right, titled Miracles of Restoration, Signs Reveal Messianic Authority.
Yes. But our approach here is impartial. It's anthropological and literary. So whether you are, deeply embedded in this tradition, or maybe you're a firm skeptic, or just someone fascinated by how ancient texts construct meaning, we are here to examine the architecture of this argument.
Just looking at the blueprint, essentially.
Exactly. We want to see how the internal logic of this grand narrative actually holds together. We aren't endorsing it, we're just unpacking it.
And it's a massive piece of theological architecture. I mean, looking at it analytically, the way this framework structures human history, and especially human suffering, it offers a remarkably cohesive lens.
Regardless of your personal background.
Right. It attempts to answer the fundamental problem of human pain, not by ignoring it, but by running it through a very specific historical process.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the vocabulary. Because the
Yeah.
framework we are exploring insists on calling a miracle a sign.
Yeah, that's a very specific word choice.
Right. From a semiotic perspective, a sign is a pointer. It's a signifier pointing to a signified.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that the modern instinct, when reading ancient texts about the miraculous, is usually to fall into one of two intellectual traps.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the purely rationalist dismissal. So we assume ancient people just didn't understand, like, virology or tectonic plates.
So they just slapped a supernatural label on everything they didn't get.
Right. And the second trap is a bit more subtle, I think. We flatten these events into just bare evidence of religious sincerity.
Oh, like a cosmic resume.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here are my references. I can cure blindness and walk on water. Therefore, you should listen to my lecture on ethics.
Which is how I think a lot of people read it today.
It's definitely the default assumption. But this specific theological framework, it rejects both of those premises. It insists these events are revelatory.
They reveal something bigger.
Right. Think about an actual road sign. You don't pull up to a four-way intersection, look at the red octagon, and get out of your car to just marvel at the reflective paint and the typography, right?
I mean, I hope not. You'd hold up traffic.
You stop your car. The sign isn't the point. The reality of the intersection and the traffic laws it points to, that is the point.
So in this narrative, a miracle is a localized event pointing to a massive cosmic reality about the nature of the kingdom being inaugurated.
Exactly.
But, I mean, a fine is completely meaningless if you don't know the rules of the road.
That is very true.
So if we are going to understand how this visible grammar of miracles actually works, we have to understand the foundational worldview it's responding to. We have to look at the baseline.
It's a starting point.
Right. If a miracle is defined as a restoration, we need to know what exactly went offline in the first place.
And the baseline in this theology is crucial. It's actually vastly different from other ancient Near Eastern cosmologies.
How so?
Well, if you look at the Babylonian or Canaanite creation myths, the world is usually forged out of conflict. You know, gods fight, a monster is slain, and humans are basically created from blood and dirt to be slave labor for the divine.
So violence and chaos are just baked into the physical material of the universe from day one.
Exactly. It's inherently broken. But the Genesis narrative does the exact opposite.
Right, Genesis 1.
Entirely. In Genesis, creation is spoken into existence in a state of absolute ordered goodness. It's a domain of wholeness. There is this profound relational harmony between the creator, the humans, and the natural world itself.
So health and peace were the default.
Health, fruitfulness, peace. They are not lucky breaks in a harsh universe. They are the original design.
I like to think about it like a perfectly tuned symphony.
Right.
Or, like a flawless, highly sophisticated operating system right out of the box.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Every line of code is optimized. The hardware and software are perfectly integrated. There are no bugs, no lag, no crashes. But then a massive piece of malware is introduced.
A fall?
Right, the fall. And this is where I want to really press into the mechanics of this theology, because the text frames the fall not just as a moral failure, like breaking a rule and getting a cosmic detention.
Right. It's not just a slap on the wrist.
It frames it as an invasion of ruin. The malware doesn't just make the system run a little slower, it corrupts the fundamental code of reality.
It's an ontological collapse. The human person becomes fractured. The relationship with the natural world becomes totally antagonistic.
So that's where disease comes in.
Yes. Things like cellular mutation, disease, blindness, leprosy, and ultimately death enter the picture. The text argues they aren't natural. In this framework, death is a deeply unnatural, invasive force.
Wait, let me stop you there, because this is a major divergence from a lot of philosophical thought.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in Stoicism or certain Eastern philosophies or even the later Gnostic movements, the physical body is viewed as a trap.
Right, the material world is the problem.
Yeah. Pain and disease are just realities of this lower material plane. And the ultimate goal is to, spiritually transcend the physical world. Like, your body doesn't matter, only your soul matters. But this framework seems to furiously reject that idea.
It fundamentally rejects it. The Hebrew theological worldview is obsessed with the goodness of the material world. Dirt matters. Flesh matters.
So the text describes the invasion of ruin. It is actively validating physical suffering.
Exactly. It never tells a sick person, oh, the physical world is an illusion anyway, so just focus on your spiritual enlightenment. The Gospels never treat suffering as unreal. Jesus confronts it directly.
So the malware analogy holds up then. Because you don't look at a corrupted hard drive and say, well, the physical computer doesn't matter as long as the idea of the software is pure.
Right. You have to eradicate the virus to save the machine.
Okay, so if Genesis establishes this perfect baseline and the fall is this catastrophic structural collapse, why does the text frame the solution through an ancient Middle Eastern political lens?
What do you mean?
Like, why not just hit a cosmic reset button? Why go through the incredibly messy, protracted history of the nation of Israel?
Ah, I see. Well, because the restoration isn't just about deleting the virus, it's about honoring the relational covenant made with humanity.
Ah, the covenant.
Right.
Yeah.
God doesn't just scrap the project. He chooses a specific people, Israel, to be the incubator for the cure, essentially. And he reveals himself repeatedly as a restorer.
You see this a lot in the Exodus narrative, right?
You do. He takes a marginalized, enslaved people, breaks the economic and political power of Egypt, and then he does things like sweetening bitter water in the desert, providing manna.
He is establishing a historical precedent. Like,
Yeah.
I am a God who intervenes in the material ruin.
Yes. And that exact precedent is what fuels the prophets. You have figures like Isaiah operating centuries later, promising a future state where the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame leap.
But it's vital to realize these weren't just poetic metaphors for people finally, understanding God.
No, they were concrete expectations of physical renewal. But then, and this is a huge turning point, you hit the Babylonian exile.
Right, around 586 BCE.
Yes. This is the great trauma of the Hebrew Scriptures.
Hmm.
Jerusalem is sacked. The temple, which is the literal intersection of heaven and earth in their theology, is reduced to rubble, and the people are deported.
It creates a massive existential void. I mean, how do you worship the God of the cosmos when his house is a crater and you are slaves in a foreign empire?
Exactly. The source framework describes this period as an ache of brokenness. It's a profound national psychological wound.
And even when the Persian Empire later allows them to return and rebuild, it's a hollow victory.
The return was incredibly anticlimactic. I mean, they rebuild the temple, but the texts explicitly note that the older generation wept because it was so diminished compared to the original glory.
So they are back in their geographic homeland, but they're still politically subservient.
Right. First to the Persians, then the Greeks, and eventually the Romans.
It's like being allowed to move back into your house after a devastating fire, but the roof is still missing, it smells like ash, and there's a foreign military quartered in your living room. You are technically home, but the exile hasn't really ended.
That's a great way to picture it. And that simmering centuries-long desperation is the exact powder keg the first-century Roman province of Judea was.
They didn't just need a political revolutionary to kick out the Romans?
No. They needed a definitive cure to the ruin. They needed the cosmic operating system restored.
Which brings us to section 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah.
The arrival of the figure of Jesus, and how this theology interprets his actions not as random kindness, but as the deployment of that exact cure.
The king arrives.
Exactly. And there is a specific interaction in the Gospel of Matthew that I think serves as the perfect decoder ring for this whole thing.
You're talking about the John the Baptist sequence.
Yes, in Matthew 11.
Right. So John the Baptist, who has basically dedicated his entire life to prophesying the arrival of Messiah, is now locked in a dungeon by Herod.
He is facing execution.
And he's having a crisis of expectations. Because if Jesus isn't raising an army, he isn't overthrowing Rome. So John sends his disciples to ask Jesus a very pointed question.
He asks, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?"
Right. And Jesus' response is just the linchpin of this entire framework. He doesn't hand him a theological essay.
He doesn't say, "Trust me, I have a secret plan."
No.
Hmm.
He points entirely to the grammar of his actions. He tells John's disciples, go back and report to them what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor.
He is literally quoting the prophet Isaiah back to John.
Exactly. He is saying, look at the signs. The ancient promises are happening in real time. It's absolute, undeniable authentication.
But what I find so fascinating here is the specific taxonomy of these miracles.
Yeah.
The framework groups them into highly intentional categories that address different domains of the human experience.
The source infographic breaks them down into 7 specific signs.
Yes. So let's dig into the first domain, the human body and the social fabric. This covers healing the sick, restoring hearing to the deaf, and cleansing lepers.
Let's look closely at leprosy because this is huge. To a modern reader, curing a skin disease might seem, less impressive than walking on water.
Right, we have antibiotics now.
Exactly. But in the first century context, leprosy was the ultimate manifestation of the fall.
Here's where it gets really interesting because we have to unpack the Levitical purity laws to really grasp the weight of this. Leprosy wasn't just a dermatological crisis. It was social and covenantal death.
Absolutely. In the ancient Near East, and specifically within the Torah, bodily wholeness was deeply tied to ritual purity, and that purity allowed you access to the temple and the community.
So if you contracted a skin disease that fell into the umbrella of leprosy, you were fundamentally excommunicated from human society.
You were cut off.
You had to live outside the camp or the city walls.
No.
You had to wear torn clothes, leave your hair unkempt, and if a healthy person approached, you were legally obligated to cover your lower face and shout, "Unclean! Unclean," to warn them away.
You were effectively a walking corpse. You couldn't touch your spouse, hold your children, or participate in any religious life whatsoever.
So when Jesus encounters a leper, the stakes are incredibly high.
Unbelievably high. Because the law of contagion in the ancient world was that impurity is always stronger than purity.
Like dirt. If you put a clean hand in mud, the mud doesn't get clean.
The hand gets dirty. Exactly. If a clean person touches an unclean person, the clean person becomes contaminated. The healthy person doesn't make the sick person well. The sick person makes the healthy person ritually dead.
But the narrative shows Jesus constantly reaching out and physically touching lepers before he heals them.
Which is a cultural scandal of the highest order. He is willingly exposing himself to profound ritual defilement. But the theological mechanism here is what scholars call reverse contagion.
Reverse contagion, I love that term.
It's brilliant. Instead of the leper's impurity transferring to Jesus, Jesus's inherent divine purity transfers to the leper. The sickness cannot infect the cure.
The virus cannot corrupt the new operating system.
Exactly. So the healing of a leper isn't just about clearing up lesions. It is a profound social and theological restoration. He is giving that person their family back, their identity back, their access to God back.
It is a total reversal of alienation.
Yes.
And you see a similar logic with the deaf and the blind, right? Because in an oral culture, to be deaf is to be cut off from the communal narrative.
You miss the stories, the commerce, everything.
So to restore hearing is to plug someone back into the network of human connection. It shows God's attention to their isolation.
Exactly.
But this framework pushes beyond just the human body. It moves into the second domain, the natural order itself. The framework points to miracles like calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee and the massive multiplication of bread.
The nature miracles are where the theology really flexes its cosmic muscles.
Okay, let's take the storm from Mark chapter 4.
So Jesus and his disciples are in a boat on the Sea of Galilee. A massive squall whips up, and these seasoned professional fishermen are absolutely terrified they're going to drown.
They literally wake Jesus up and ask if he even cares that they're dying.
Right. And Jesus wakes up and verbally commands the wind and the waves to submit. And the text says there was a great calm.
Now, a modern rationalist reads that and says, okay, a weird meteorological coincidence that they attributed to the rabbi. But what did the sea mean to a first-century Hebrew mind?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to read it through the lens of ancient cosmology. The sea wasn't just a body of water, it was the abyss. It was the primordial chaos.
Right.
In surrounding cultures, the sea was literally a god yam, or Tiamat, a monstrous force of destruction that the high gods had to violently conquer. In Hebrew poetry, you see references to Leviathan, the chaos monster of the deep.
So the sea represented the untamed, hostile forces of the fall that threatened to swallow order?
Yes. So when Jesus stands up in the boat and tells the abyss to shut up, he isn't just showing off a neat magic trick to save his friends.
He is claiming the sovereign authority of the Creator from Genesis 1.
He is subduing chaos. It's a direct theological claim that the Creator has stepped into the boat. He restores peace to chaos.
That is wild.
Right.
And the feeding of the hungry, the 5,000 in John 6, operates on a similar, highly symbolic level.
It does.
You have thousands of people in a remote area with no food. Jesus takes a peasant's lunch, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and multiplies it to feed an entire multitude with baskets left over.
The socioeconomic context of Roman Galilee is really crucial here. These were subsistence farmers and laborers living under crushing taxation from both the Roman Empire and the temple elite.
So food insecurity was a daily terror.
It was. So on a purely physical level, Jesus is addressing the immediate grinding poverty of the crowd. He restores provision.
But the grammar of the sign points backward and forward. Right?
Yes, it points backward to the Exodus, where God provided manna from heaven for the Israelites wandering in the desert. Jesus is replicating the ultimate act of divine provision.
And it points forward.
It points forward because in the Gospel of John, Jesus immediately follows this event by declaring, "I am the bread of life." He shifts the focus from the physical calories to his own identity. He is claiming to be the ultimate sustainer of human existence.
And then we reach the final domain in this taxonomy, the ultimate frontiers of ruin, demonic oppression and biological death.
Delivering the oppressed and raising the dead. This is where the kingdom directly assaults the absolute extremes of the fall.
So exorcisms and resurrections.
Right. Demonic possession in this theological framework is the ultimate loss of human selfhood. It is the hostile takeover of the image of God by an invasive evil.
So when Jesus casts out a demon, like in Luke 8, he is essentially executing a military eviction. He is reclaiming occupied territory and restoring sanity and freedom.
Exactly. And death raising Lazarus from the tomb after 4 days in John 11 is the final boss.
Death is the ultimate non-negotiable consequence of a fractured reality.
Yes. By reversing decomposition and calling a dead man out of a grave, Jesus is planting a flag in the ground and declaring that the final enemy has been put on notice. It demonstrates divine authority over death itself.
It's so systematic. And you mentioned the Gospel of John earlier, which is really explicit in calling these signs.
John is incredibly meticulous about categorizing all of these events. He rarely even uses the Greek word for miracle, which is dynamis, meaning power.
What word does he use?
He almost exclusively uses the word semeion, which literally means sign.
So turning water into wine isn't just a party trick. It reveals messianic abundance.
Exactly. Healing the nobleman's son reveals authority at a distance. Healing the blind man reveals Jesus as the light of the world. They're revelations of identity, not isolated wonders.
Which brings us to section 3, the core theological engine. Because having looked at what the miracles were, we now need to look at the engine driving them.
Why do these specific actions carry such theological weight?
Right. What is the specific nature of this authority? The framework identifies a core theological paradox that I find incredibly compelling: the perfect integration of mercy and authority.
It is a profound paradox because human history shows us that power and compassion are almost always inversely correlated.
Let's use an analogy here. I think about it like modern leadership. Often we see authority separated from mercy.
Like a CEO.
Exactly. Think of a high-level architect or a CEO who has the supreme authority to redesign an entire city grid or restructure a company to save thousands of jobs over a decade. But that CEO is looking at spreadsheets in a high-rise. They don't know the names of the people living in the neighborhoods they're bulldozing.
Right, that's supreme authority with zero intimate mercy.
Right. And on the flip side, think of a friend or like a combat medic. A combat medic is down in the mud, holding the hand of a wounded soldier, applying a tourniquet, whispering words of comfort. Massive, intimate mercy.
But the medic doesn't have the authority to call off the war or change the battle plans.
Exactly. You usually have to choose between sovereign distance and powerless intimacy. But the argument of this text is that Jesus perfectly fuses the architect and the medic.
Jesus doesn't heal as a mere humanitarian with no claim over the world, nor does he rule as a tyrant without compassion.
His authority is gentle because his compassion is sovereign.
Yes. When he touches the leper, that is the intimate mercy of the medic in the mud. But the leprosy actually disintegrates on a cellular level. That is the sovereign authority of the cosmic architect.
And the source argues that when one blind man receives sight, the personal meets the cosmic. The entire cosmos is shown to be under new management. Individual salvation and cosmic renewal are intertwined here.
And this fusion is what authenticates his messianic claim. But, I know where you're going to push back here.
Oh, I definitely am. Because if we accept the premise of this integrated supreme power, if the architect is in the mud and he has the power to permanently alter the blueprint, why is it so localized?
It's the big question.
I mean, I have a hard time squaring the sovereign authority idea with the inefficiency of the narrative. If he has the power to cure one leper in the dirt, isn't it incredibly arbitrary not to just eradicate the leprosy bacillus entirely from the globe in that exact moment?
Like, why not just push a global network update?
Exactly. If you have the cure to the malware, why only patch 3 computers?
That is the most rigorous philosophical objection to this theology, and the text actually anticipates it.
How so?
The framework argues that the localized nature of the miracles is entirely intentional because of what it calls the greater miracle. You have to look at the narrative pacing of redemption.
Okay, the pacing.
The miracles were never meant to be the final permanent fix for the physical world in that specific moment. They were signposts pointing to a deeper structural repair that had to happen first.
Ah, you're talking about the incident in Mark chapter 2, the paralyzed man.
Yes, exactly. This story exposes the theological engine better than almost any other.
Set the scene for us.
So you have 4 friends who are so desperate to get their paralyzed companion to Jesus that they actually climb onto the roof of the house where Jesus is teaching. They dig through the clay and the tiles and lower the man down on a mat right into the middle of the room.
It's a scene of absolute chaotic desperation. They're interrupting a major teaching moment.
And they are doing it for one explicit reason. They want a physical miracle. They want his spinal cord repaired.
But when Jesus looks down at the man, the very first thing he says is profoundly shocking.
Right. He doesn't say, get up and walk. He says, son, your sins are forgiven.
Which is wild. You can just imagine the friends on the roof staring down through the hole, completely bewildered. Like, we didn't tear apart a stranger's roof for a theology lecture. Fix his legs.
Exactly. And Honestly, the religious leaders sitting in the room are equally offended, but for a totally different reason.
Why are they offended?
They immediately recognize the scandal of the claim. They think to themselves, this is blasphemy. Only God can forgive sins. Because in their legal framework, a sin is a debt owed to the Creator. You can't forgive a debt owed to someone else.
Right. Like if you punch my brother in the face, I can't walk up to you and say, I forgive you. I'm not the aggrieved party.
Precisely. By claiming to forgive the man's sins, Jesus is implicitly claiming to be the cosmic aggrieved party. He is claiming to be the God against whom the sins were committed.
And he knows exactly what they're thinking, right?
He does. So he asks them this brilliant logical question, which is easier to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk.
It's a total trap.
It is. From a human perspective, it's infinitely easier to say your sins are forgiven because there is no way to verify it.
It's invisible.
Right. If I tell you your soul is clean, you can't check my work. But if I tell a paraplegic to get up and walk, I am putting my authority on the line instantly. If he doesn't move, I am exposed as a fraud.
So Jesus says, but that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And then he turns to the paralyzed man and heals his legs.
He performs the visible, impossible thing to validate the invisible, ultimate thing.
And this addresses my earlier pushback about why he didn't just eradicate all disease instantly.
Yes. The text makes a bold claim. The deepest human problem, the deepest ruin of the fall, is not bodily brokenness. A healed body will eventually age and die anyway.
The deepest ruin is separation from God.
Exactly. The structural malware is sin. Physical restoration is deployed to prove he has the authority to execute the spiritual restoration.
The physical miracle is a signpost pointing to the greater miracle, reconciliation. The healing of the legs is just the visible receipt for the invisible transaction of forgiveness.
Which perfectly transitions us into section 4, which deals with the most difficult, lived reality of this theology.
Right, because this brings up the most obvious question for anyone listening. So what does this all mean for us today? If the Messiah has this power and he inaugurated this kingdom, why is the world still full of disease and death?
Why does the kingdom still look like a war zone?
Exactly. How does this framework prevent its adherents from descending into profound cognitive dissonance?
By utilizing a theological concept called the already not yet tension.
Okay, let's break this down, because this tension is the tightrope this entire belief system walks on.
The framework describes the miracles of Jesus as eschatological previews.
Meaning they point to the end of time.
Right. They are first fruits, not the final harvest. They are proof of concept that the kingdom is invading, but not its ultimate completion. The best way to understand this is through a modern analogy.
Let's hear it.
Think about a massive global software infrastructure. Let's say a revolutionary new operating system has been finalized by the developers. The code is complete. The definitive fix for all the old bugs has been written and successfully compiled.
That is the already. The victory is mathematically secure.
Right. But the global rollout takes time. Millions of legacy machines are still running the old, corrupted software while the network upgrade propagates. We are living in the space between the finalization of the code and the universal installation.
So the miracles were beta tests.
Yes, localized installations of the new OS to prove the code actually works. They point toward the cross, where the curse of sin is born, and the resurrection, where death is defeated.
Or think about it like a biological immune response. If you contract a severe virus, there is a definitive turning point in the battle when your immune system finally produces the specific antibodies that neutralize the pathogen's ability to replicate.
Right. The war is fundamentally won at a microscopic level. The virus is doomed.
That is the already. But you still have 102-degree fever. Your joints still ache. You still feel like you are dying. The symptoms of the war are still raging in your body, even though the definitive victory has been secured.
And that is the not yet. The framework argues that the cross and the resurrection are the production of the antibodies. The ultimate curse is broken. But the fever of history is still breaking.
Living in that tension is incredibly difficult, though.
It is. And the text outlines 5 specific, dangerous traps that people fall into when they lose their grip on this already not yet tension.
Let's go through them, because we need to tackle these misunderstandings. Danger number 1 is treating miracles as entertainment.
Right, this is turning miracles into magic shows.
This is the spectacle seeker.
This happens when you totally strip the sign of its grammar and just consume it as content. You see this in historical accounts of crowds following Jesus just to see the next neat trick.
And you see it today, right, in certain sensationalized religious movements.
Absolutely. The danger here is forgetting that the miracles demand a response of faith and moral repentance. If you just watch them like a magic show, you remain unchanged. You applaud the beta test without ever installing the software.
Okay, danger number 2 is almost the exact opposite, treating them as only symbolic.
This is the modern rationalist trap, reducing them to psychological metaphors.
We touched on this earlier. This is the person who feels embarrassed by the supernatural claims of the ancient text, but still wants the moral teachings.
Right, so they say, well, Jesus didn't actually multiply physical bread. The miracle is that he inspired the selfish crowd to share the lunches they had hidden under their coats.
I have literally heard that exact sermon, and it totally neuters the theological engine we just spent an hour discussing.
Yeah.
If he didn't actually command matter, then he doesn't have the sovereign authority over the fall. He's just an inspiring community organizer.
Exactly. The text insists they are real historical acts. You don't have to sacrifice historical reality to find symbolic meaning.
Danger number 3, expecting all now. I want to spend a minute here because I think this is where theology can become actively harmful if misunderstood.
This is a huge pastoral danger. It's the hyper-charismatic trap.
The danger of believing every physical wound should be healed immediately in the present age.
Right. It's the belief that because the new code has been written, your specific computer should never crash again. It teaches that perfect physical health and prosperity are guaranteed right now if you just have enough faith.
And the psychological damage of that is catastrophic. Because, like, if you are a parent praying for your child's leukemia to be cured and the child dies, this theological misunderstanding leaves you with only 2 conclusions.
Either God is a liar or it's your fault for not believing hard enough.
It entirely destroys the not yet. It demands the final, universal rollout in the middle of the beta phase.
It creates a brittle faith that just shatters the moment it encounters the lingering realities of the fall.
Which leads into danger number 4, detached from Christ. Treating the wonders as standalone events without tying them to Jesus' identity.
The vending machine mentality. You want the benefits of the new operating system, but you don't want to submit to the terms and conditions of the developer. When a miracle becomes detached from Jesus and his redemptive mission, it becomes a transactional commodity.
And finally, danger number 5, missing the greater miracle.
This circles back to the paralyzed man. It's losing the forest for the trees. It's forgetting that every person Jesus healed in the first century eventually died anyway.
Right. Lazarus was raised from the dead, but then, a few decades later, his heart stopped again.
Exactly. Physical healing in this age is a wonderful, temporary reprieve. But the text warns against forgetting that reconciliation with God and the future resurrection are the ultimate goals.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Let me push back on this entire already not yet structure. Because a skeptic could listen to this and say, you know, this is just an incredibly elaborate, brilliantly constructed theological cop-out. It's an airtight excuse designed to explain why miracles aren't happening all the time.
It lets God off the hook for the ongoing suffering.
Exactly. How does the internal logic of the text defend against that critique?
It defends against it by pointing to the cost absorbed by the architect.
What do you mean?
Well, if God were just sitting in heaven explaining that we have to suffer for a little while longer while he manages the cosmic timeline, it would absolutely be a cop-out. But the narrative centers on the incarnation and the cross.
The architect doesn't just send a memo. He enters the corrupted system.
He subjects himself to the malware. He experiences the betrayal, the physical torture, the separation, and the death. The tension isn't a cop-out because the God of this narrative suffers the not yet alongside humanity.
That is a profound distinction. The authority is validated by the shared suffering.
Exactly.
Which brings us to section 5, the practical implications for the listener. Moving from high theology down to grounded reality, how does this specific framework, according to the source, actually change the way a person lives, prays, and suffers?
It creates a highly specific posture for living. Let's start with faith and prayer. Because the already is true. Because Jesus proved he has absolute authority over disease and chaos. The text encourages incredibly bold prayer.
Right. If God isn't distant, we can pray for healing with expectation.
The system is not closed. Believers are instructed to pray for healing, for deliverance, with genuine expectation.
But, and this is crucially important, they do it with reverence, fundamentally submitting to God's will. respecting the not yet tension.
It's an attitude of God can, God might, but even if he doesn't today, the end of the story is still secure.
And this raises an important question about how to handle grief, because it totally reorients how you process pain.
It does. It doesn't offer toxic positivity that promises all illness is healed now. It doesn't tell you to put on a fake smile.
Instead, it offers a really profound comfort. Suffering is not ultimate.
It offers the comfort of an expiration date. It acknowledges that the cancer might win the battle today. The depression might linger for years. But every past miracle recorded in the Gospels serves as a historical signpost guaranteeing a future wholeness.
The malware will be fully uninstalled,
Yes.
and that future hope is supposed to fuel present action. Which brings us to the implications for discipleship, ministry, and evangelism. Because the framework doesn't just tell people to sit around and wait for the end of the world.
No, it casts a vision for the sociological function of the church today.
The infographic summarizes this by saying the church is to continue as a witness. Restoration isn't just about bodies, it's about identity, relationships, vocation. The gospel heals the whole person over time.
The text states that the church is supposed to be a foretaste of the healing reign of Christ.
Like a pilot program.
Yes, an embassy of the future kingdom operating in the present ruined world. Ministry means serving the sick, marginalizing evil, and speaking hope into despair.
It's active participation in the grammar. When a community serves the sick or fights systemic poverty, they aren't just doing nice humanitarian work.
They are acting as localized signposts. They are offering the world a small, tangible appetizer of the grand feast of restoration that is coming.
Wow. This has been an incredibly rigorous journey. Just to concisely recap, we started by looking at the concept of miracles through the lens of a casual observer, maybe viewing them as a glitch in the matrix or random magic.
Right.
But through exploring Chris Arvelas's framework, we've unpacked a sophisticated theological language. We've seen how these events are positioned as a precise grammar of restoration.
A grammar that directly reverses the ontological ruin of the fall, answers the historical trauma of the covenant and exile, and previews a comprehensively healed cosmos.
It's a breathtakingly cohesive narrative structure. From the flawlessly tuned operating system of Genesis through the viral corruption of the fall, to the architect entering the system to deploy the definitive cure, and leaving us with the tension of the final rollout.
It really is an amazing architecture to examine.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. Something that builds entirely on the internal logic of the source text we've just explored. The text states that the church should be a foretaste of the healing reign of Christ, and that miracles are eschatological previews of a world where, and it points to Revelation chapter 21, there will be no more tears, no more crying, and no more pain.
The ultimate uninstall of the malware.
Right. So if this grand narrative holds true, if the entire arc of scriptural history is moving inevitably toward total restoration, then what does that mean for your daily life?
That's the big question.
Every single time you choose to forgive a wrong instead of retaliating, every time you sit with someone who is sick, every time you bring order to chaos or fight for justice in your community, are you merely doing a good deed, or are you actually participating in the exact same valuable grammar of the kingdom? Are your small acts of restoration actually mini signposts pointed to the end of sorrow?
That is something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep looking for the signs of restoration in your own world.